All right, inside of this Prezi PDFs folder, what I'd like you to do, if you would please, because this is what we're going to go over for a bit, is about halfway down, I'd like you to open up the one that says 05 MVC forms.pdf. Everybody's got it, correct? Good. And remember, I'm leaving today it'll be about 4:15. All right? So no official breaks, I guess. All right. Just so you know, you may not care at all, which is fine, but for whatever reason, Paul seems to be kind of enamored with Prezi, and it's a neat package. All right, maybe you've used it before, maybe you haven't, I don't know. But this is the one that we're looking at now. And notice if I go into present mode, it's kind of like, for lack of better words, it's sort of interactive PowerPoint. All right. You know, and you can move your way around. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go over lesson 5 that's on here. I didn't realize this, but there's a feature on there where you can right mouse click on Prezi files and choose save as PDF. So that's what I did, and that's why you've got those. So with that said, you know, like I said, let's just work our way through here so you won't have the magic of Prezi, so to speak. But you can open yours up if you want. You can look up here. Whatever is the easiest for you. All right. So we are ideally today getting full-fledged into the MVC way of thinking about things. All right. So we're going to start with, as it says there, going over separation of concerns, talk about the MVC design pattern, talk about the model part, the view part, the controller part, look at the folder structure, and I know some of this we've done. I understand that. Explain how URLs are routed to action methods, use ViewBag, create a form that passes data back and forth, and modify the layout of an ASP.NET MVC application. All right. So with this separation of concerns, I'm not going to read this. This is fine. You put a picture in there of a refrigerator, whatever. But, you know, when you think about it, back in AWD1111, the first class you took, one of the things that we talked about in there was your HTML file should hold only HTML. And then it should have a link to one or more cascading style sheets files and script tags for one or more JavaScript files. This is the same thing. In other words, the type of code that should be used for a model is all that should go into the models folder. The type of code for controllers, the only thing in controllers folders. And the type of thing for views, the only thing in views folders. It's exactly what they're talking about here. And he gives an example. You know, and he just says, basically, if you were working for a payroll system, you might have multiple people who are employed there, and they each have different needs. And you don't sit there and always have to feel like you've got to combine everything. All right? So when you look at this, and I know you've seen some of this before, but when we talk about each point that's in here, models, as it says, models are classes. You know this already, and you know that classes are code only. All right? So a lot of times what they'll be will be data classes. There'll be classes that end up becoming tables in your application, database tables. All right? As it says, models are also used to model and enforce business logic. We've talked about business logic before and what that is. Views, basically look at it, the views are what you show the end user. So if you're creating an application, what you end up sending to their browser is going to be the view. There can be multiple views. Now it says here a typical view, or a view typically deals with displaying data from a model. That's true. But you should never have it where the model and the view directly talk to one another. That's what one of the things the controller is for. It's the conduit between those two. All right, we've talked about that before. So the controller, when an incoming request comes in, meaning that somebody has keyed in something into their browser window and hit enter, the controller is responsible for processing that request. And actually, There can be multiple controllers. So before it even goes to the controller, it goes to a router. And the router's got to figure out, which controller it goes to. All right? So as it says, these classes obtain data from the data model and typically return this data to the view for displaying as HTML. Controllers may contain logic for filtering data based on parameters in the request. We've looked at this a little bit. We're going to get into it in more detail. For instance, let's say that what I wanted to do was I wanted to see all my products, and let's assume, for example, that I've used this example before, that we're Jeff's Sporting Goods store, and I want to see all the products, but only the ones that are concerned with golf, as an example. Well, then what I would do is I would be doing a filtering, where sport equal golf type of thing. And if I wanted to be even more granular than that, I might say something like where sport equal golf and item equal golf clubs, something like that. All right, so notice what he's got here. What is the MVC design pattern? Why do we use it? All right, and what is ASP.NET MVC? Now, you've done this before, but we're going to do it again right now. What I'd like you to do, if you would, please, is get into Visual Studio. So start it up if it's not going right now. Tony, I don't know, did you ever do anything more? Did you try to reinstall it?
I tried, but I think they also have to really redo it again. So that's some possible reinstalling it.
Okay.
It should hopefully by tomorrow.
Okay.
I'll let them know if it works.
All right, so we've done this before, but we're going to take this really, really slow. We've opened Visual Studio. All right, bam, there's step one. Step two, we don't need this start page that's here, so we can close it. All right, step two, File, New, Project. All right, and again, we have done this many times before. When we have done this in the past, either, why does that keep changing on me? All right, when we have done this in the past, either we are doing a forms project or we started to do MVCs. So it says select install templates, Visual C# Web. You know what? You know this. Installed Visual C# Web. All right. So when we're there, this is all we've got. And I've mentioned this to you before. The big difference between these is ASP.NET Core Web App is MVC 6. And the one we're working with, because it's the one our book has, etc., is MVC 5. Right there. So that's the one that we want to choose. Again, nothing really new per se right there. We've looked at this before. Every time I go and switch back to this, it's whatever. All right. So it says set the project name and set the location and the solution name. Click OK. Well, this one, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to redo our miles per gallon program. All right. So to my knowledge, you don't have, and maybe you do, but I don't know. Let's just call this Lab 01 MPG. Just run it together. Lab 01, not like that. Lab 01 MPG. Make sure you've got ASP.NET web application chosen. All right. What we want to do, at least for now, is we'll just save this to our desktop. All right. And I think I've told you this before, but on the off chance I have not, if you look on your screen, this name right here, this name that you see right there, and the project name, by default, they're the same name, but they don't have to be. All right. So Lab 01 MPG, click OK. That brings us up to here. Again, all stuff that you've seen before. All right. So as it says, select MVC, but we're not done after we do that. So hold on. All right. I want to do something first for you. All right. In fact, we're not even going to select MVC. What we're going to choose instead of MVC, if you've already done it, well, what kind of hole was you have to remove it and start over? Let's choose empty and MVC. So it'll be empty, and what I mean by that is we're doing a miles per gallon program. All right? This is me speaking. I don't see any need for us to have anybody log in to be able to use a miles per gallon program. So by us choosing empty, what's going to happen is we're going to get a very stripped down version. Even by choosing MVC here, we're going to get a very stripped down version of a project. We won't have the ability to log in, log out, etc. And what you'll see in just a minute is the stuff that we have actually in there is going to be minimal, the folder structure, etc. Not only that, notice on here, it says no authentication, and I can't change that. See that? All right, which is okay. So we don't care really about unit tests. This is just kind of a garbagey project, for lack of better words. So just click OK. And then if you look over here or on yours, you're going to see the magic here. And what I mean by the magic, no, it's not really magic, of course, but as we come over here and we start to take a look at it, what you notice if we take a look right here, if you'd all look on the screen or my screen, whatever. First of all, I don't need this opening screen, so I'm just going to remove this. But if you look here, yeah, we have app data, which is empty. We've got an app start, which has got a route config. But the route config has almost nothing in it, which is, again, is fine. We don't care about that. We've got what? We've got no controllers. When we did this last time, when we chose MVC for our project, we had a home controller, we had a manage controller, and we had an account controller. Remember that? Now we have nothing. All right? Models. We have nothing. Views. We've got a web config in there. We're not even ever going to talk about the web config that's in the views. All right? And we've got the web config down here. So if you ever have to change a web config, it should always be the one at the bottom. All right? So what we have right now is basically an empty project. There's virtually nothing in it. All right? And since there's nothing in it, since we really don't have any controllers, since we have no models, and since the only thing in views is web.config, if you look on the screen here, if I try to run it, I'm going to get an error. I don't have any .html or .cshtml. I have no files like that. And the system is looking for something like that to be able to use, to be able to start the project with, and it can't find it. Does that make sense? All right. So stop that run. I don't need this. Right. And again, I'm just going to keep jumping back and forth. In fact, you know what? I'm going to make this easier on myself. I'm going to close this because I've got a copy of this open also right there. All right. So I'm on slide 13. Again, very hard to read if you look at it on the screen, but I do want to spend a minute to go over it. Because what Paul has an exceptional ability to do is to sit there and kind of summarize everything that's going on. So if you look right here, this is what he's saying. I don't want to read any of this stuff to you, but you should have an idea of what the controllers class is. Every time you create a new controller, that controller will automatically be a child of system.web.mvc controller. It automatically is. All right, that's its parent. All right. He has in there what a home controller, what an account controller, and what a managed controller is. That's if we create that standard project like we've done before. All right. The models, again, he's got the ones with the standard. And same thing with views. So I'm not going to go through that stuff right now. I just wanted you to be able to see that. We've talked about app data. We've talked about app start on the next slide here. We've talked about content. We've talked about fonts. We've talked about scripts. So all this stuff that's in here, this beginning stuff, we've talked about. Then you'll notice there's a global.asax file. And it says used for configuring global application hooks, often used for authentication. Let's just put it this way. That's a fairly complex topic. It's over my head. All right. And web.config, which we have said you use it for a lot of things, and one is to set up your database connection. You already know that. All right. We've looked at a bunch of this stuff already. Under routing. That route config file, as it says, defines how URLs are mapped to controllers and action methods. Nothing new there. URLs in MVC normally take this form. This is the one that we care about. All right? You know, localhost followed by the controller name, followed by the action name, possibly followed by an ID. Now think about this. You don't have to look, but please listen. Think about when you are going to need an ID. And think about if we're working with CRUD. You know what CRUD is now. If I am going to be creating a new record, I don't need an ID because I'm going to be creating a new ID. Does that make sense? If I do a select and I'm selecting everything, I don't need an ID. Does that make sense? But if I'm doing a select and I only want a certain record, I need to provide that ID because that's the record number. Same thing with if I'm doing a delete. If I'm not deleting everything, if I just want to delete one or more, a subset of records, or if I want to update one or more records, then I'll need that ID. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. All right, so here's where he starts it. So he says controllers provide the back end for your pages. I'm going to ask you a question right now, and if one of you thinks you know it, all right, feel free, raise your hand or just shout out, whatever. Let's assume Tony goes in for a job interview, all right? And while he's there, he's getting along pretty well. He's answering questions, etc. And there's a group of people there. And one of them says to him, Tony, would you rather be a front-end developer or a back-end developer? All right? And then let's just assume he looks at him kind of funny. They say, all right, Tony, what's the difference between a front-end developer and a back-end developer? All right, what is it?
The front end is more like a graphic or something. The back end is actual coding of it, isn't it?
That's part of it. But I look at it this way. The front end is what end users see. All right, the back end is what they don't see. What you'll hear in Java next semester, I believe you've heard this when you took the class, Colin, is we talk about interface versus implementation. And I always give this example, and maybe it's a stupid one. I don't know. But I bring up a calculator, and I say, I put in the number 367, and I click the square root key, and it gives me an answer. Okay? And I'm asking you this question. Anybody in here? Can anybody in here say with 100% certainty exactly the formula that's used by that calculator to give me that square root? Does anybody know? I don't know. Would you also agree that let's say that they have some formula, and now tomorrow Matt Purcell comes up with a brand new formula for creating square roots, and it runs 3 times as fast. So they basically take the wiring out of the calculator and they put in the wiring with his new stuff in there. But if it works just the same, does that matter to you? In other words, yeah, you'll get a faster answer, but if the implementation is changed, as long as the interface doesn't change, you don't care. And typically, if somebody's going to change an interface, they do it because they're going to make your life easier. All right? So as it says, the controller is the back end. It's doing a lot of the grunt work. So again, you've got to look at it this way. In fact, where would that be? I'm starting a new presentation on something that I'm going to be trying, and And I just moved all my stuff, so I got to remember where I put it. In a nutshell, this right here, this is MVC. All right? And what I mean is this. You type in something into your address bar. All right? Don't even worry about view right now. But you type that in. That goes through some kind of a routing mechanism. You know, you've got to look at it this way. Again, if you'd please look at the screen here for just a second. If we look at our project right now, we don't even have any controllers, right? But if we were creating something pretty doggone complex, would you agree that it wouldn't be out of mind, let's say, to think I might have 5, 10 controllers? Isn't that possible? Orders, products, etc. Might have a whole bunch. I might have only 1 or 2, but I might have a whole bunch of them. The point is, what's got to happen when I'm doing this is the system comes through there and the routing figures out, based on that route config thing, it figures out which controller I should call. All right? Then that controller goes and it makes a request to the model. The model, it doesn't have to be a database, but it has to be some kind of a data store. Does that make sense? Literally, it can be anything. It can be a spreadsheet. All right, so if somebody says, well, I made this spreadsheet, I don't really want to make a database. They don't have to. You can do it off of a spreadsheet. But the point is controller to model to data to whatever the data store is, back to model, back to controller. That's when the view is involved. All right, so this in here, basically all back end. This here, front end. Does that make sense? All right. All right. So if we start taking a look at this then in a little more depth, this is what we already went and did this. So it says, please code along. We went in here, we did all this stuff. All right. It says change it to individual user accounts. Don't worry about that. All right. But I guess I'm actually ahead. This is again if we did that canned project. Okay. You already have seen this. Look up on the screen if you would. This view is what happens when, you know, whatever is here is what runs when you say home index or just home or just the name of the port. This one right here is when you say home about. This one here is when you say home contact. There's nothing new there. All right. We may or may not have looked at this, but we've talked about this a little bit. Anything that you see inside of starting with an @ sign and in curly braces, that's Razor code. Razor code is C# code written and put into an HTML file, making the HTML file a .cs HTML file. Does all that make sense? All right. This stuff that's right here, everything that you see right there, where I'm putting the kind of circle around, everything under the blue, that's all HTML. There's nothing new there. There's nothing you shouldn't be able to do. Yeah, there's some bootstrap put in it, but there's nothing else in there that's new. You know, to run the program, you either click over here, all right? Well, typically you click the green arrow right there, all right, to run it. Again, nothing new there. This is new, and I want to make sure you see this. This is slide 23, all right? Look on the screen, please. If your program is running, and let's assume that the program's running and Tony realizes instead of orders, he accidentally wrote odors. You know what I mean? He left the R out. Okay? And all he has to do is he has to go back in and he has to change he has to change the view, just because it was a misspelling. Well, as it says there, if you've got a view that you've got to edit, you don't have to stop the program run. You can go into that view file, make your change, go back out to where your program is running under that random port, refresh, and it'll have it in there. Now, you can stop the run and start it again, but you don't have to. But that only works if the change is in the view portion. If the change is in the controller or in the model, then you've got to stop the run and restart the run. All right? All right. If we did this, look on the screen here, please. If we added this, viewbag.message equal hello world return view, what would happen? Not very much. We get a message that would down there that would say hello world. I mean, it's no big thing, right? But you can put that in. All right? Then he came into the Jumbotron here, and he took all that stuff out that was in there and just replaced it with my website. Then he added this. All right, just to show you that you can, I guess. All right. Now, this is where, no, we haven't started our program yet, but I want you to understand what's going on here. Some of this stuff we've talked about in depth, some of it very little. So if you look up on the screen, what he's done here is he has changed. Previously, this said public action result index paren. Now it's got string name, which means that when we run this, when this index runs, there has to be a name provided. If there isn't one, all right, if there isn't one, what are we doing? Well, we're accounting for that right here. We're saying, hey, if there's a name, show it. Otherwise, put in the word world. Does that make sense? So world in this case, this right here, that's a default value. You can set up default values for virtually everything. Don't have to be strings. Quite often you might come in and set up a default value for a numeric field to be 0. Not always, but there might be a very good reason for doing that. So look at the difference between these. If you just say home index, it's going to say hello world. It'll take the default. But if you say home index and then you put in after the index question mark name equal me, it says hello me. Evan runs it and puts there, question mark name equal Evan, it'll say hello Evan. All right. Do you remember? I'm asking you this. Do you remember from what we talked about before? Notice how this says int question mark. What does that question mark mean? The one right here. There. What does that mean? It means it can be null. It means maybe I don't have a favorite number. Or maybe I've got 50 favorite numbers. All right? So again, if we run this and we don't put in a favorite number, it's just going to say, hello me, your favorite number is, and there won't be anything there. Here we've done it. We've said me and favorite number equals 72, so you get that. All right. So we've talked a little bit about this. If you look on the screen, what is ViewBag? ViewBag is a dynamic object, meaning that you can create it at any time, and you can put virtually anything in it. All right? It does not have any predefined properties, so you can have it hold anything. You can have it hold a string, and a Boolean, and a date, and a double, and an int, etc. It can hold, literally, it can hold thousands of things. Since it's dynamic and since it doesn't have any defined properties, that's why the IntelliSense doesn't work. So when you say ViewBag dot, nothing happens, nothing magical. All right? As it says, it provides one way of transferring data from a controller to a view. Now look at what he's written here in yellow. However, because the compiler has no way of checking the data types, it's generally recommended to pass the data to the view using either a model or a view model object instead. So what he's saying is, if it's expecting numbers, all right, you don't want to use ViewBank for something like that, because if it's not there, the program's going to blow up, because you can't really add any logic in with the ViewBank to do any validation. It says we will discuss these techniques in the upcoming weeks. For now, we'll use ViewBank. If you want more, there's an article about ViewBank. All right, finally, this is where we are. All right, so we want to come in. I'm on slide 29, so we're about halfway through this. So what we want to do in our is, right now we have nothing in our controllers folder. All right, so as it says, we want to right-click the controllers folder, choose Add Controller, select MVC Controller Empty, and select Add and MPG Controller and Add. Well, was that too fast? Then let's do it like this. Right mouse click on your controllers folder. All right, choose Add, choose Controller. We have always chosen MVC Controller with views. If you don't, I want to make sure you understand the differences between these. If you choose this one, you get a controller with almost nothing associated with it. If you do this one, it says it's got read-write actions, but it doesn't write that code for you like we've seen inside of the controller. If you do this one, it writes that code for you. So for now, we're just going to choose empty. So please do, and choose Add. And they ask you for a name. And he wants us to call this MPG with a big M and a little PG. And click Add. What you should see, as you did it in your controllers folder, and you should have, you now have MPG controller.cs. And if you look at the file right here, not much in there, is there? Since we said that it was empty, we did not get the read-write stuff. So there's an index, but there's no edit, there's no delete, there's no update, there's no insert. That should make sense to all of you. All right? So what we just did is we just added a single controller. Notice if we look right here, we only have one controller, but look at what's in our route config file. When we're running it, by default, it thinks we're trying to do what? We're trying to run the home controller, the index method underneath that, and we can have a parameter. All right? Again, who cares? Well, trying to run the program again. And it's failing. You should be able to understand why it's failing. It's looking, because I didn't give it the name of anything, it is looking for a home controller. There isn't one. All right? Stop that run. All right. So, like we just saw, this is what's in there. All right? So what do we get? We get a bunch of using statements. Do you understand the importance or the reason for the using statement? I'm asking. What that basically says is there are some references that we want to be able to use in our program. Please, again, look up on the screen here. Most of these references, if you look up here, they're in here under reference. So we're adding some of that stuff. We're saying we want to be able to use some of that stuff in here. And you'll notice we're not using system, system collections generic, system link, and system web. How do I know I'm not using any of those four? because they're grayed out. So we could remove them. All right? When you go in and you create a project like we did, the project is housed under what's called a namespace. So the namespace for this project is Lab01 MPG. Why? Because that's the name of the project. All right? So when we look right here, and back to here, again, these are grayed out because we're not using them. This is not grayed out. We have to use this. All right? And again, that using system.web.mvc, that's, look on the screen, please. This file right here, this reference, that's what holds this. That's why we need that. Because now our controller can do anything a, quote, typical controller, unquote, can do. All right? So it's the name of our project, dot in here, controllers. All right? Our class is MPG controller, which inherits from controller. All right? Right now, when we go and click, if I, and I'll do it in a minute, if I come in there and I put MPG on the end, it's going to attempt to return this view. Well, let's look in here. Okay, what do we have inside of views? We've got an MPG. But guess what? There's nothing in it. There's nothing in it because we said it was empty, right? So we've got to create our own view if we want this to work. That's the reason for going through all this song and dance stuff in here. So this is the code that he wants you to put in here. There are different ways of doing this. This is the way we're going to do it. So go into your controller and add everything in there that is blue. I will do the same thing after you get done. So what are we doing? We are saying that this index is expecting a miles driven and a gallons used. They're both floats, but either, neither, or both could be left off. All right? And then what we want to do in here is we want to set viewbag.mpg equal to miles driven divided by gallons used. Can somebody look on the screen there and tell me a potential problem with this code the way it currently exists? Yeah, what if you don't put anything in for either one of them? So really we could have put some conditional logic in there that said if there's a value in both, if neither one is null, then do that. All right, so let me add it just as you did. right, and I believe that was everything that we had here. I guess the question mark should have been here. Now I think it looks exactly like it did, or it does, on slide 31. All right. Again, the problem still is exactly what we looked at before. That is return view. There isn't one. All right. So what we want to do, if you would please, find views and find your MPG folder right there. Right mouse click on it. Choose Add. Choose View. All right. We're going to change the name from View, which is kind of a dumb name. We're going to call it Index. We'll leave the template for now as empty without model, which means we're not going to add anything else. All right. Look on the screen. I think you'd all agree this is empty. Now click Add. After the magic happens momentarily, now you'll notice there is an index.cshtml file. Not very much in here right now. All that's in here is a view bag title and a thing that says index. But it's important because please look up on the screen here. If I now right mouse click on this index.cshtml file and I choose view in browser, notice it's MPG index. It works just fine. See that? You notice what's not here? We don't have any of the stuff over here for logging in. We don't have an about. We don't have a contact because we started with nothing. All right, so this is all that we have. All right. So let's give it something so it can at least do something. All right, so let's come in here. And in our index.cshtml file, let's change the title because index isn't very good. They want us to call it what it is, miles per gallon. All right, that's the first thing. And in fact, when we do this, instead of having to say index, we'll have it say viewbag dot title. And again, please look up on the screen here. I'm going to remove this. In fact, I'll get it back to what it said, which was index. Would you agree, looking at the screen, not trying to confuse you or be funny or anything, would you agree in line 3 we're setting viewbag.title? Would you all agree with that? I mean, I would. But notice that if I come in here and I still type in viewbag dot, it doesn't show me title. IntelliSense picks up nothing from the viewbag. So we'll put title in here. Then underneath that, we're going to put in this. Put it in a paragraph. Your MPG is all right. And then we'll end that. Now, again, please look up on the screen. I'm going to click the double disk icon. I am clicking the double disk icon to save everything. I'm going to run this again. You may already be able to guess what it's going to do. Well, doesn't like something I wrote there, but I'll fix that in a minute. All right, let's go back and fix that. Oh. Viewbag.title, your viewbag is, how about an @ sign there instead of a % sign? That would, @ sign instead of a % sign. All right? So let me save this. Let me try to, again, right mouse click on here and choose View in Browser. All right? Does it make sense to you that there's nothing in there? As Andrew said before, we haven't said anything. All right? So what we're supposed to do is run it again, but when we do run it again, if you look up on the screen here, what we want to do when we run it, yeah, I'll say the same thing, view in browser, but after this, after index, we want to put in question mark, miles driven. Does it might be case sensitive. We'll find out. Miles driven we'll set equal to 200, and gallons used we'll set equal to 10. So somebody tell me, what should it now say when we refresh? Index. What's that? Instead of use. There you go. I'd like to say I'm making these mistakes on purpose, but I'd be lying. Right? Now, we've already done stuff like this. And to be honest with you, again, this is pretty much too hard, isn't it? It would be kind of silly to expect that your end user would be able to, inside of his or her URL, that they'd be able to type in something like this. That would be a lot to expect from them. All right, again, you may agree with that. You may not agree with that. I don't know. But what I'm telling you is it really is quite a bit to expect. All right, so what? So let's go back and look at this for a second here. What we want to do now, all right, we created the empty view. But now we want to make the view a little more functional. You already saw this. If you look up on the screen here, the view is the front end. So in other words, it's what the user sees. For lack of better words, it's what the site is going to look like. All right? And I've said this kind of thing before. You can have a really well-written site that has a really bad-looking view, and to anybody who looks at it, the site sucks. You can have a site that's actually pretty poorly written, but that's got a really nice view on it that people think is great, whether it is or not. So what we want to do is we want to come in here, and I'll leave this up here for a second. All right? I want you to go back into your index.cs HTML file, and please add all the code here that you see in blue. Go back to index.cs HTML and add all of the code that you see on your screen. Not that here, of course, but here in blue. Has everybody got that? don't know. I don't think I can do this. Nope. Now, does everybody have that all keyed in? Anybody still typing? Tony, you're in his way. Finish this up, then we'll take a short break. I'm on no tomorrow. Today and tomorrow, I'm leaving at 4:15 both days. Thursday, I'm leaving at 2:45. And it's funny. I told my wife. She said, "Well, what time are you done Friday?" I said, "I took off Friday, like you told me to." "You did what I told you to do?" She was like, just totally amazed. All right. So I want to put it in, put the same code in. So give me a second here. Oops, good. Okay, so I've got to ask the question here. If you look up on the screen, true or false? Something you could have done halfway into the AWD1000 class. We're not worried now about sending this anyplace. Remember, since it's a get, it's only going to be showing that to us anyway. All right. So what do we have? Well, this is a label. The label is for, why do we use this? I'm asking you this question. Why do we use that label for equals? Anybody remember? What happens automatically is if you click on the label, it moves you into the text box. Not like that's a big thing, but it does it for you automatically. It's an HTML5 feature. It used to be there was no direct correlation between the label and the actual text field. All right. All right, so we've got a label, miles driven, followed by a text field, another label for gallons used, followed by a text field. All right, so what am I going to do? I'm going to save this, and I'm going to, again, right mouse click on here and choose View in Browser. All right, now it's not perfect, not perfectly lined up. Well, you already know this. There is absolutely zero there is absolutely zero CSS on here, right? So I can still come in here like we did before, and I can put in here question mark. Oops, I don't want that. So I can put in here question mark, miles driven equals 20 and gallons used equal 10. And it gives me the answer. All right? Which is all fine and dandy, except, again, please look on the screen. Right now, would you agree with this? It's figuring out the miles per gallon. Would you agree with that? But there is no direct communication right now taking place between those three view bag values, miles driven, gallons used, and MPG, and the things on this form. Would you agree with that? In other words, if I go and put in here 200, and I put in here 20, nothing, or 10, whatever it is, nothing magic is going to happen. One reason nothing magic is going to happen is we don't have a button on there yet, because I left mine out. Hopefully you put yours in there. So, what do I want? I want input type equals submit, value equal calculate. All right. Let's, again, since the only changes I'm making are in the model, I can come back. I could just keep refreshing. So there it is. But if I come in here and put in 200, I come in here and I put in 10, all right, nothing magical happen. Would you all agree with that? Because those two things, right now at least, are not communicating with each other. All right? So let's take a quick break. It's 1:36. Let's come back about 1:45. All right? We're taking abbreviated breaks today because we're getting done early today. All right? And we'll pick it up there after the break.